These are good. Recording? Yeah. Hey there, Nico here from Homestead Zambia. It has been quite a few months since my last video. It got a little busy. I ended up going on a few consulting trips for my botanical work, and I didn't quite have as much time to then put to this channel, unfortunately. But I'm back. It has now progressed past the rainy season. We're into the dry season. It's actually our kind of spring here at the moment, and a lot has happened. Right now I'm in the domestic vegetable garden, and we've had quite a few changes here. We took out the large ficus that used to be here, or I should say the remnants of the large ficus, because it had been dying back. So we have that cleared. We put up new fencing to keep the dogs out of this space. I don't want them to be coming in here and urinating or pooping. And we've started to look at doing a changeover. So we've made a few smaller beds here. We've got them planted up with some spinach, eggplant, lettuce, tomato. This is mainly the production area for things that we will consume in the house, but also some of the smaller things that we don't need to grow lots of, which we would do in the other vegetable garden. So things like the tomatoes and the eggplant, for our own consumption, we don't need a huge long line of it. It'll suit growing more in this vegetable garden than it would in the other. But this is still a vegetable garden in transition at the moment. These smaller beds are accommodating what we would just grow mostly for things like vegetable greens and the like. The tomatoes and the eggplant are in here at the moment because we haven't quite finished the rest of the beds, and that will be an ongoing process over the next few months. So we've done these up, they're slightly raised. This is generally the course of action that we'll take, not so much during the dry season as it is now, but more in the rains when we do get those heavy rains, so that they will drain much faster. Because of the dry season now, mulching is key, and we've put down some straw mulch to at least help to protect the soil and to keep more moisture in the soil over the course of the season, especially as the hot weather starts to come on. There are a few other things, like this is from my most recent production of pak choi. I let a few of them go to seed because I'm hoping to be able to collect seed and save some of those seeds to grow more of. Pak choi is not easily available in Zambia to buy a seed, so I've taken that into account, and I'm hoping to get at least a good amount of seed that I'll be able to sow in a few months' time when the weather cools down a bit again, and where pak choi will actually appreciate that kind of temperatures. So as part of the change over the domestic garden, we did take in some area that previously had grass, and we've put down this black plastic as a means to try and suffocate the light from the grass and kill it off at a much faster rate. This is a creeping grass. It forms long creeping shoots like this, both above ground and below ground, and can be quite difficult to deal with unless you can really kill it off initially. So this black plastic has been blocking out the light for the last several months, and we will soon be able to pull it out and start to dig over the area and prepare it for more plantings. This space to the right of me will then become more vegetable beds, and these ones will be quite a bit longer than the ones on the other side of the domestic garden, and this is where we would grow things that we do want slightly more of, but again, not as much as we would in a 50-meter long row in the other side of the vegetable garden, in the what we used to call the market garden. So we still have a bit more work to do in terms of preparing here and moving some of the perennial things like this perennial spinach that we have planted, and it will be moved into other areas of the garden to make way for the full-on bed. So we'll get to that in the next few weeks, but as it stands at the moment, they're just kind of waiting for that time as we get other things ready. Here amongst the coffee, We've had a very light harvest this year. Unfortunately, I did a hard pruning last year after the harvest. Some of the trees had gotten actually quite tall. I pruned them back quite a bit. They've grown since then, but it also meant that I didn't get a very good harvest this year effectively. It's just about done. We've got a few more beans to harvest and process, but I won't be pruning them this year. I'll leave them, so hopefully that'll give a better harvest. And then next year, I'll look at doing a light pruning again. But I got to get this last of the harvest off soon. The flowers will be coming out in the next few weeks to a few months, and the cycle will continue. But I put a lot of effort into growing coffee. I like my coffee, and there's a bit of a joy that I have in being able to drink coffee from our plot here. The underplanting of this dark leaf sweet potato that I put underneath the coffee has come on well in some areas and a little bit patchy in others. I've done it essentially as just to provide a ground cover. As you can see, the grasses have since dried, but the sweet potato is still going strong. I'll probably be taking more cuttings of this so I can plant it further afield and get a nice kind of cover underneath here, both providing a bit of an ornamental effect for this area, but as a means also of providing fodder for the goats. The goats will eat this up, stems and all, very readily, but before I can get to that stage, I have to make sure that I am getting a good amount of material to cover this area. Once it's in the ground, even if I pull the stems, it will reshoot and come back. But I'm not quite at that point in time of being able to provide it to the goats yet because it's not as well established as I'd like. Here in the orchard, we had a fantastic harvest of the kumquats. There's just a few remaining fruits on here. As I alluded to in my last video, most of them I actually processed into a compote with the mango, with mulberry, with grenadilla or passion fruit, and it worked really well. And now we're enjoying those compotes, you know, usually at dinner with desserts and things like that. We've had a good harvest of most of the citrus this year, and in fact the lemon just in behind me is coming up with a lot of lemons following the pruning I gave last year. Again, last year's pruning of the citrus trees was pretty strong, and this year as I go through with the pruning, it will be more lighter pruning, collecting, trying to open up a bit more space within the canopy of the trees just to make sure that they've got proper airflow and that I don't exacerbate issues of fungal or bacterial infections and stuff like that. So that will be happening in the next few weeks, just as we're going into the hot weather. Now, all of our trees here are irrigated on a weekly basis. So if they weren't irrigated, we wouldn't be pruning at this time of year. We'd be pruning as the rains start. But because they are irrigated, I can prune at this time of year knowing that the tree will then put out new growth and recover from that pruning as we go through and lighten the canopy a bit. Our pigeon peas have done very, very well this year. Our last rains was actually around the end of February, and since then none of these have been given any water. And as you can see, I think in the last video it was about 1 meter tall. Now, you know, some of these are actually taller than me, so just over 2 meters tall. We've done most of the harvest so far, harvesting predominantly from the older trees, and we've actually harvested almost about 50 kgs of pigeon pea. And we've then gone and fed the empty pods and the like to the goats. I won't prune back these specimens this year. As their first year, I want to put them, I don't want to stress them too much basically. And I'll leave them to grow After this year, once we're back into the rainy season, they'll continue to grow. And then next year, after that harvest, I'll do the first pruning on these. But they're still looking very healthy, considering that they haven't had any rain in 4 or 5 months. They probably will lose a number more leaves as the hot dry season really progresses. But at this time of year, they're still doing really well. All right, well, we're here amongst one of the goat enclosures. The goats are doing well, but as you can see, it is very dry. With the ending of the rains quite early this year in February, things dried out fairly quickly, and then, well, goats are quite destructive at times. They've gone through and basically eaten most green things that are in here. Plans are afoot for putting in those copses that I mentioned, but I haven't had the time yet to be able to get to that. But we have allowed certain things to grow with that idea of long-term benefits to the goats. So this is, I believe it's now Vachellia siberiana. One of the acacias that produce edible pods by the goats. Now this is a young tree. It will still take some time before it produces fruits, but when they do, now they will fall directly where the goats can eat them as they fall effectively. But as you can see, the goats have done quite their job in terms of pruning these up. Most of the trees that are in these areas have been browsed to a certain area, the browse line. And in putting in copses and even protecting some of these trees, what I hope to do is extend the length of fodder availability to the goats in the area that they spend quite a bit of their time effectively as well. But that will come on over the next few years. It's a slow process, but you got to start it at some point in time. In the interim, we have been feeding them with the prunings of things like the pigeon pea. As I've processed the pigeon peas, also the shells from the pods have been fed to the goats, and I have been getting a few pods of the Vachellia as well as the Dichrostachys that we have on the plot to feed the goats as they have been falling. But now we are starting to enter into that more difficult time of year in terms of keeping the goats and providing them with fodder that we can produce here on the farm. And it'll only get a little bit more difficult as we go into the hotter dry season. But we'll always figure out a way. There'll be more material for them, and it's just a matter of planning. I'm going to end the video in what we used to call the market garden. We've kind of changed the concept of what we're using the space for now. We're no longer looking at doing vegetables for market gardening. We are actually using the space now to produce things that we need quite a bit of for our own sustenance, as well as for everybody who lives here on the plot. From things like these beans that we're growing for being able to then store, to the maize in behind me, which we grow this time of year for our own purposes, but then also when the maize is ripe and we've eaten it, we use the green stalks to feed the goats. And that's been very important for us in that kind of September, October, even early November period, where green fodder for the goats is very much lacking, unfortunately. So we get to benefit from being able to eat the green maize, and the goats get to benefit from then eating the stalks of it. I've also got vegetables that I basically just grow for myself, like the asparagus, which is now starting back into growth. So with the asparagus, we do need quite a bit of space in order to get, a number of the stalks every year. I usually, as the cold dry season starts, stop watering it, so it gives it a bit of a dormancy, and it hasn't been watered since, well, probably since about March or April. And now you can see it's actually starting to throw up some new shoots. So it's now telling us that it is time for it to be watered again after its bit of a slumber. So we'll start doing that, and it'll be producing the nice little green shoots, which we'll be able to consume. In here as well, we grow things like onions and leeks that we can then be able to have and store. Onions have gone up in price quite considerably in Zambia over the last little while. And finding their availability sometimes has been a little bit more difficulty. So having our own production of onions, a consistent production of onions. So as we are harvesting, we're also planting new onion seedlings to keep going. And that is just at least allowing us to maintain a consistency for the things that we use quite a bit. Other than that, the transition between the seasons has been quite good. The vegetable garden is looking quite nice here at the moment, and we will continue to cycle through the crops as we need them. So I'm going to end today's video there. This has been more or less a recap of what's happened over the last several months. I'm enjoying our little cherry tomatoes that are now starting to ripen here in the garden. And we will hopefully now be continuing to put out more consistent videos, as has always been the plan, but sometimes life gets in the way. But other than that, stay tuned to see how we progress going forward. And in the time being, I'm going to continue eating and enjoying some of these cherry tomatoes. These are really good.